Introduce our members, beginning on my left.
Terry Ann Hahn, Consulting Town Planner.
Dan Beret, CEO.
Ashley Majorowski, Land Use Administrator.
Deborah Cozzetti, Secretary.
Bruce Tyler.
Chantel Foster.
Carolyn Freeman.
Terry Grady.
Bob Ellsworth.
Mike Warnoff, alternate.
Okay, next order of business is to accept the agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, all right. All right, the agenda is approved as presented. Next order of business is to, to notice the letter that we got to continue application 17-06 till tonight. We all have a copy of that. So next order of business is the continuation of application 17-06. Is there anything the applicant would like to say?
Yeah, for the record, my name is Steve Sullivan.
How about getting up to the microphone?
Oh, there's a mic.
Or, all right, there's a microphone right there if you prefer.
It's live.
For the record, Steve Sullivan, professional engineer with CCA LLC out of Brookfield, Connecticut. I just have a few points to go over since our last hearing in regards to changes to the plans. Just going to turn off the lights if you don't mind, because it's up on the...
Get on it.
This one? Since our last hearing, we got some additional comments from town staff, and I'd just like to go over some of those real quickly. The Sage House, get to the next slide here. Sage House, which is the existing structure that's located here. We have eliminated the second story. We were proposing to use the second story as office. We have eliminated that use up there. It's just not viable for that second story. We have added 4 more handicap spaces based on town comments. So we updated the parking table based on those comments. We added expanded the 4 underground stormwater gallery systems. We have System A here, System B here, System C, and System D. So those were expanded based on town engineering comments. Some other additional comments, we added some silt fence around those stormwater galleries during construction when they go to the first phase of demolition. We also created Plan Sheet C12, which was a zoning compliance sheet that lists all the zoning data that was requested by the town staff, and that's this sheet C12. Has zoning table, parking calculation, the waiver requests, and so forth. We also added notes about monitoring the specimen trees during construction by an arborist, as requested. And lastly, we added some safety signage regarding riding bikes through the Brainerd Place. Did I miss it? Yeah. So at all the entrances, including the sidewalk entrances, there'll be signage about people have to walk their bikes through Brainerd Place. And so that was the result of some of the comments we received from town staff. So those are really the major changes since our December 19th or 21st hearing. And-
Jeff Jacobson proposed a number of conditions.
Correct.
Do you have any comments on any of those?
We concur with those conditions that he proposed in his last letter.
All right, so everything's agreeable to you?
Correct.
Okay, that's easy enough.
So the traffic engineer is briefly going to talk about his last memo, and then we'll open up to any more questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
You need the lights off still?
Just in case, I need to reference something on the site plan, I guess. Actually, Steve, do you have the? For the record, my name is Charlie Baker. I'm a licensed professional engineer with the VHB in Wethersfield, Connecticut. Since our last hearing, there was a town traffic engineering reviewer, DLS, issued a new comment letter on December 28th. This comment letter generally reiterated a recommendation to either provide a right turn lane on Main Street into the proposed right-in site driveway or to close this driveway. That's this driveway right here. We submitted a formal response to this letter on January 16th, so I'll just briefly summarize our response for you. In short, we think that a right-in driveway on Main Street at this location is appropriate for this development, and we don't think that the right turn lane on Main Street is warranted. The current width of the right travel lane on Main Street past the gas station right here is over 18 feet wide, which is more than enough for a vehicle to bypass a vehicle turning right on the left. My colleague Joe Balskis actually parked his car by the gas station earlier this week just to watch vehicles drive past him, and he took several photos, just vehicles driving past him on the left. There's more than enough room for them to pass him without leaving their travel lane, so we think that that's a sufficient bypass that effectively functions as a right turn lane already. Additionally, since our site driveway is located so close to the gas station driveway, providing that right turn lane, it would need to extend past the gas station driveway right here. So the right turn lane would have to start back here, go past the gas station driveway into our site. And we think that that could cause some confusion for drivers exiting the gas station, because vehicles exiting the gas station would have to cross an additional lane of traffic, and there's a possibility that when vehicle turns into that right turn lane, you may think that they'd be turning into the gas station, when in actuality they're continuing past the gas station into our site. I just want to point out that our objection to the right turn lane has nothing to do with cost. It's a relatively minor improvement, especially considering the very significant roadway improvements at other locations we're proposing under this project. It's just that Joe Balskis and I have discussed this at length, and our professional opinion is just that the right turn lane is not warranted or appropriate for the site at this location. And finally, as we've mentioned before, Main Street is a state road, so this driveway and any potential transportation improvements at that location would be subject to the review and approval of DOT under the OSTA approval process. The town will continue to be involved during that process, and the town LTA will have an opportunity to provide input on the final design of that driveway if they have any further concerns. The DOT always takes that advisement from the town under consideration. So, thank you.
Okay. That it? You have lights back on?
Bruce, we have Dave Spears here, if you wanted to ask him any questions, our traffic engineer. It's Dave Spears, he's here if you have any questions.
You wanna comment? Go ahead.
For the record, my name is David Spear. I'm principal engineer with DLS Traffic, and we were retained as a consultant traffic engineer to review the project, and I had several comments. My second comment was really a clarification of the original comments, which were never addressed by the applicant. My recommendation was not a lane as just was described. We indicated that it would be nice to have a refuge area because you have 1,500 cars making the right turn through that slot, And it's a very, it's a decision area where the reason there's 18 feet there is because the lane splits. You go right or you can go straight. So they need it's in a diverge area. So there's an activity going on there. There's during peak hours, I don't know when Mr. Bulkus was there watching people go by him, but I expect it wasn't during the 1,500 cars going past. So the assertion that this is a good, safe design is debatable. I mean, there's two positions could be taken. My original suggestion was that it makes more sense to bring the right turns in at the signal. And I requested that they do an analysis to show how it looks when they bring their right turn into the signal. And my estimate, and my charge was not to redo their analysis, was that it will work fine when you bring it through the signal. The right turn movement we're talking about is 89 vehicles during the AM, 105 during the PM peak, and 100 during the Saturday peak. So there was some discussion in their comments about how they often go through this area. They also indicated there's a prior use, a car repair facility. That traffic pattern is nothing like this one. A car repair, the traffic trickles in, it trickles out. With retail and the mixed use, the traffic will come in the morning for the office and come out of the site for residential. The retail traffic goes all day during retail hours. It's a totally different pattern, and the numbers are different. So in my opinion, it's a safer, better, cleaner design to have the traffic go around the corner, turn right in at the signal. The traffic coming in where they want it to come in is already in with the 1,500 cars. So now you have 1,600. You have people turning right into this driveway, people going straight at the signal, people going around the bend at 40 miles an hour. So it can be done. Is there a rule that says you can't do it? No. Is it better and safer to come in at the signal? I believe it is. So anyway, I know they refuse to do it. They won't give us the analysis that shows the signal operation, their signal with all the traffic, which is easily addressed. If they need to, they could put a slip ramp at their signal for the right turns. There's roughly 100 coming left through the existing signal, and there'd be 100 coming right through the slip ramp. So you'd have about 200 going right in at the signal, and that can easily be accommodated. The other issue, or the other thing from a marketing point of view, that slip ramp brings them in the back of the retail, the enter only, and then they come to get to the residential area. They still have to go through the boulevard area and to get to residential. If they come around the front, all the traffic goes through the signal, sees the retail, and then they would come in the boulevard, come either to the retail side or the residential side or the commercial side. So there's really no disbenefit to bringing it in the front. So I really don't see why they're opposed to it. But I know developers want all the access they can get, and they prefer not to limit anything. So that's the case. So what I would recommend is when you approve it, which I'm sure you will, that you just put a note that we request that the state look at the option of bringing the traffic in at the signal, the right turn. And it'll be a choice. Even if you put the one-way enter only, the traffic will split. Some will go in the one-way enter only, some will go around, use the signal. The question is whether you want to encourage them to go to the signal, because it's a less complicated, confusing location. There's no other conflicting movements at the signal. They control all the property along the frontage there. There's no reason not to do it that way. And they have never addressed my original comment. My original comment was not to put a lane there. My original comment was, why don't you bring them in the signal? That's my comments.
Okay. Do you want to respond to that or not?
For the record, Joe Balskis, I'm not going to sit up here and go back and forth. We're professionals, you hired a professional. the bottom line is that this driveway decision is going to be made with the State Department of Transportation review as part of the OSA process. We are entitled to an access on Main Street. There's 2 properties there that had access there, so we are entitled to it. We're going to get the access. You know, there's you can look at things 2 different ways if you want, but the access is safe. It is a good design. It will work. It'll serve the development. It'll serve the town. And the issue of the access on the state highway will be decided during the OSTA permit process. So I think we'll leave it at that and move forward. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from members of the commission?
I just wonder where he got that figure of 40 miles an hour coming through there. I'd love to see people go that slowly.
Those are my field observations of the site. I didn't measure every car. Usually we don't take the fastest cars, we look at the 85th percentile. So there would be some going above that speed. But it is a huge radius, and they're designed to move traffic through that movement. That's why it's not part of the city.
Other questions or comments from members of the commission? Questions or comments by members of the public? All right, hearing none.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
if I might, in my Terry Hahn, LADAPC's consulting planner, I would just suggest in my review letter, there were 5 items for the commission to take into consider as to whether or not there was adequate information that you had that would enable you to make a decision before you go to close the public hearing. If you could just walk through that, then I think that'll help everybody.
I don't know if we have that. Do we have that?
Yeah. If you'd like, I can just read them for you, and then you can make a decision, or however you want to go forward.
Well, we're going to close the public hearing, but
But I think you want to just.
if you want to say something, go ahead.
Okay, so, does the commission require any additional planting along the southern property line than what's being shown? That was one of the questions. The second one was, is the commission satisfied with the information provided for the rehabilitation and reuse of the historic structures on the site? Is there, the third question is there adequate amount of brownstone shown on the proposed plans? Again, this is to determine if there's adequate information for you to be able to make a decision, not yes or no, if you agree or don't, that's just, is there enough information?
Okay.
A number of renderings or views were requested during the public hearing. Does the commission feel that these need these views in order to make a decision on the project? And the last one was, does the commission require any additional information regarding the terraces on building E and F? So if you feel that you have adequate information in order to make a determination, then that would be the answer to these questions.
Thank you. Once again, last shot. Any members of the public want to offer any questions or comments? Okay. A motion is in order to close the public hearing on application 17-06.
So
So moved. Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, nay. All right, the motion passes and the hearing on application 17-06 is closed. We're probably not going to vote on this tonight. We're going to.
We would recommend that we'll be circulating a resolution for the commission's consideration with various different conditions. So we would recommend postponing the vote.
That's what I just said. We will postpone the vote and have our attorney have a chance to look at any conditions and stuff, and we will probably vote on this motion at the next meeting, if that's agreeable to everyone. Yes? Okay.
do we need anything in the process, or just?
Well, we've
postpone?
closed the public hearing, but
Right.
we haven't had a motion yet. So we're going to get I presume any review will take place, and so we will be ready to vote. We'll see whatever review, conditions and stuff, and we'll be ready to vote on it at the next meeting. Am I right in that?
If we have questions on the
We can-
conditions, or we can add a condition, or,
Up until we vote.
okay.
But just
We can
amongst
talk as
ourselves.
much as we want. What we've done is, we now will no longer
Yes,
accept
just
evidence
us.
from the public or anybody else, except from our attorney. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving right along. Application 17-09, a request for a text amendment to zoning regulations, section 953C4, earth material removal, filling in excavation, application procedures and requirements, general requirements to permit the screening, sifting, washing, and crushing of material native to the site to be used for site purposes and off-site purposes with restrictions in residential zones. Application of Portland S&G LLC. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing on this application? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, the public hearing on application 17-09 is now open. Is the applicant here to speak to the?
Is somebody?
Here he comes. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't need the subdued lighting if you don't. So.
No, yeah, we can turn the lighting up.
Easy to move.
Yeah. Can we turn that off? 'Cause it's going
Yeah,
right in our faces.
and we can turn that off too. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Peter Alter. I'm a lawyer. I practice law in Glastonbury, and I represent the applicant and the proponent of the proposed change in the zoning regulation as was read for the call of the public hearing. Portland S&G has two principals, Scott Dufford and Scott Palugi. Mr. Dufford is not available this evening, but Mr. Palugi is present, as well as myself, as proponents of this application. Little history of why this application has come forward, I think is in order. The site off of Glastonbury Turnpike has been under active excavation by a number of people, most recently the Ansaldi family, and then Mr. Dufford and Mr. Palugi's company. But the excavation stretches back about 75 years in total. Ansaldi and then the present excavation company have operated the site for about 40 years in total. Currently, the site is being operated under the latest renewal of a special permit that this commission granted in 2016, set to expire in August of this year. And we will be filing an application to renew the excavation permit in a timely way. The actual expiration date is August 18th, 2018. Last May, we appeared before the commission with a request for relief from a condition of the approval that had been in place for a number of years, specifically to allow the operator to screen material on the site that could be transported, exported off of the site. There is a prohibition in your regulation that says that screening can only take place for material to be used on site, and we sought relief from that particular regulation. After a public hearing and after information was received by the commission from your town attorney, the commission voted in May 18th with a letter of decision issued May 22nd indicating that that request had been denied. No appeal was taken from that denial, and Portland S&G went on excavating under its existing permit, as it will if and when the winter ever ends. They will start up again. And they've operated in accordance with that approval and in compliance with your regulations for the period. After the commission denied our request in May of 2017, Mr. Dufford and Mr. Palugi determined that the appropriate course of action to follow would be to seek a regulation change that would permit on-site screening and processing of the material on the site for off-site use. They asked me to draft a regulation for the town to consider. I did that. I presented it to town staff in advance on a preliminary basis to get some feedback so that when it came to the commission, staff and your town engineer would have already had input into the proposed regulation. We did that over the course of last summer and through the fall. I believe the commission has a letter from Mr. Jacobson, your consulting engineer, and he had provided comments through the land use administrator to me and asked for my reaction to certain questions that he asked, and I responded to him. This was back at the end of August in 2017, and offered my suggestions as to some of the matters that he was commenting on. And as a result of that communication and exchange of information, I modified the proposed ordinance to more closely align it with Mr. Jacobson's comments with respect to the proposed regulation, so that the regulation that you have presented to you as part of our application materials represents changes from our original draft based on comments and questions that Mr. Jacobson asked in his preliminary review of the proposed regulation. I think that his suggestions were well received by my clients, and we were enthusiastic in our adoption of his suggestions to make the regulation more coherent and more effective. The other information that we received this week was commentary from Carrie Olsen, town attorney, in terms of her review that came from the land use office to me earlier this week. I've had an opportunity to review Attorney Olsen's comments, and I find her suggestions to be appropriate, and if the commission saw fit to adopt a regulation, we have no objection to utilizing the changes that Attorney Olsen suggests. They certainly don't rise to the level of significant changes, and in fact would be considered as clarifications and additional restrictions than what we proposed. So I don't think that the commission needs to be concerned about renoticing and re-advertising based on Attorney Olsen's suggested changes. And I will state for the record that we have no objection to the changes she suggested. Again, I think it made the regulation more easily applied. As indicated in the memo that you received from your land use administrator, there are a number of properties in Portland to which this regulation could apply. It certainly applies to my client's property, and we certainly don't make any bones about that. It was designed to prevent, or at least certainly discourage, anyone with a smaller or shorter duration excavation that may be associated with other kinds of development from seeking to process material on site as the excavation is underway. We think that by imposing the conditions that we suggest in our regulation, you avoid the issues of these kinds of activities occurring in residential areas of significant density, certainly avoids having truck traffic on residential roads, since we suggest that this is only feasible on arterial or state highways. And so I think that the regulation that you have before you speaks to the issues that you as a commission have to consider when you consider a change in the regulation. And without intending to lecture you, I do want to at least state and clarify that we recognize the difference between the functions you perform when you consider a subdivision, when you consider a special permit, and when you consider a zone change. Subdivisions, as I'm sure you've been told, are a matter of right if the person proposing the subdivision meets all the requirements. That person is entitled to approval as a matter of law. Special permits, again, are administrative in function. You take the special permit application, you compare it to your regulation. If the permit application satisfies your regulation, the applicant is entitled to approval. That is not the case with a zone change or a zoning regulation that is proposed as we have here. This is asking you to act in your legislative capacity, not your administrative capacity. And so you have more flexibility, you have more discretion, and you have a legislative function in enacting regulations. There are some guidelines that case law and state statute have developed to guide commissions. Connecticut General Statutes 8-2 is the underlying zoning regulation by which all zoning matters are governed fundamentally in the state of Connecticut. And you have certain mandates that are imposed on you by that statute to protect the public health, safety, convenience, and property values within your community, to give reasonable consideration to the character of the district and the peculiar suitability of property for a particular use, to encourage appropriate use of property. Those are some of the functions and general standards that Connecticut General Statute 8-2 provides to you as you perform your legislative function. That isn't all of them. It goes on for 2 pages. But those are ones that, at least to me, are relevant to the consideration of a change of regulation. I did review your 2016 Plan of Conservation and Development, and the proposal that's before you is really not spoken to within the body of that document. So while it doesn't offer any specific guidance, it does speak generally to supporting economic development. It speaks to the preservation of the character of Portland and appropriate use and protection of natural resources. So those are the standards, I think, that the Commission is asked to apply when it considers a regulation such as we propose. I'm aware that there are a number of letters that were received through the Land Use Administrator's office. I got copies of at least 3 of them in opposition to this proposal, and everyone, and I have great respect for everyone's right to express their opinion in a public hearing with respect to zoning matters and with respect to the application or change to zoning regulations. Some of the information in the letters is not accurate, and so I want to make sure that, at least for the record, I clarify some of the statements. First of all, as I indicated, this use of this property has gone on for more than 75 years. It is not a newly created excavation. It is a substantial piece of property with substantial natural resources to be utilized in the manner in which it is and in compliance with your regulations. It has been successfully operated first by the Ansaldi family and now by Scott Dufford and Scott Palugi for a number of years, without, as far as I know, any significant or even insignificant issues arising as to their operation. When we appeared before you last May, we presented you with a comprehensive sound study, a design to protect surrounding areas from the noise that could be generated by a screening plant, and also a new design for backup alarms that greatly constricts the disturbance to people from backup alarms. We all understand that every construction vehicle has to have a backup alarm. That's unavoidable, but as we demonstrated to you last May, there is a new design of a backup alarm which has a great deal more control and protection for people not directly behind a vehicle. We believe that we have a plan that will protect everybody who feels that there may be an imposition on them with respect to the allowance of a greater amount of screening and processing of material than is currently permitted. The good news for the Commission is that if you adopt this regulation as we ask you to, the burden is on Portland S&G or whoever else may try to make use of this regulation to continue to comply with your regulations. We come back every 2 years for renewal, so that if you were to adopt this regulation and approve an application for that special permit when we come back in later this year, 2 years later, we would be back before you. And if in fact we have not successfully done what we think we can do, what our sound engineers tell us we can do, then you would have every right to deny that special permit or, in fact, undo that regulation. So what we're really asking you for is an opportunity to prove that what we're saying is correct, and that it will not be an imposition on anyone for the surrounding properties, and that what we have spent time and money researching and demonstrating to you is in fact something that we have the capacity to complete. So the risk is on anybody who attempts to utilize this regulation, since there's a great deal of investment that has to occur in order to meet the standards that we designed and presented to you last May, and including retrofitting all of the equipment on the site to meet the standards for the backup alarms that we also suggested. That risk is on the applicant. For the Commission, you get to decide whether we've met the standards that you expect within 2 building seasons, 2 excavation seasons, when we have to come back in August of 2020 for renewal of that permit. So we see a fairly low risk to anybody if we're permitted to do this. And Scott were a little concerned about the letters from neighbors. We're not aware, we operated last year, we're not aware of any complaints that were made, at least that we were made aware of, by any neighbors during the operation of this last season. So for people to indicate in letters that they've suffered disturbance or that there's been noise pollution that they feel they're suffering the results of, we're not aware of that, and we certainly weren't made aware of it. If they made complaints to the town, we were not made aware of them, and certainly would have spoken to them or tried to address them if we could have. The other benefit of being able to screen material on site is that the excavation will move ahead at a much more rapid pace. Right now, material that has to be removed from the site and either sold in its excavated state or taken somewhere else to be processed. It makes it more expensive, and it makes it less marketable. If the material can be screened on site so that different kinds of materials can be offered for use in construction projects, this excavation will move faster. As the commission may recall, there is a substantial amount of material remaining on this site, about 500,000 cubic yards as of our last renewal. And it would be in, I think, all parties' best interest to complete the excavation of the site and then to bring it into either a residential use or some other use that the town might approve. Scott Palugi and Scott Dufford think they've been good citizens and good protectors of the property that they own. We have no awareness of any issues that have come up, either from truck traffic or their operation on site. We think that this proposal gives them a reasonable chance to make good on the representations that we made last May and we would make during a permit application this year as well. And if we can't comply, if we don't satisfy everyone, this commission has the ability to either revoke the permit, change the conditions to it, or in fact remove the regulation that we propose from the Portland zoning regulations. We do have a number of letters in support of the application that we present. I'll submit those for the record, Mr. Chairman. They speak to the quality of the operators as well as the lack of concern that at least these citizens have for the operation that's gone on there for so many years. There are people who live nearby. Rick DeCrescenzo lives at 938 Glassbury Turnpike and indicates he's a direct property abutter and has no concerns and supports the application. Al Gondek lives at 12 Old County Way. He speaks in favor of the application, and the other letters are from Portland residents, Portland business owners who support the application and support the efforts of Portland S&G to make their process and their work more productive without causing any issues to nearby neighbors. So I'll submit those. Eight letters to the record. If I can. The only other matters I would put in the record, because I don't know if they'll find their way into the record, is items that I referenced. One is the May 22nd letter of denial. My written response to Jeff Jacobson's comments that resulted in changes to the initial draft of the regulation. You have the memo from your land use administrator, which would be part of the record, Mr. Chairman, so I don't need to submit that. Is that correct? And you have the comments from your town attorney, which would also be part of the record, so I don't have to submit those. Thank you.
Although, just to interrupt you a second.
Yes, sir.
I know you said this already, but I'd like to hear you confirm that the form of the regulation that our attorney commented on made changes is acceptable to you and to your client?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
happy to answer any questions, and obviously I would like the opportunity to respond if
Okay.
there are other
Questions or
questions
comments
that come
by
up.
members of the commission?
You know what, I don't remember how long, or how many weeks you do the excavating. Was there a week limit on that?
There's a limit on screening. There's no limit
Just
on
the screening.
excavation. Yes, ma'am. There's a condition of approval that limits the amount of screening that can be done.
And it was weeks?
3 weeks.
3 weeks, okay. That's what I-
And that condition has perpetuated itself from even back when the Insaldes were actively excavating the site.
Other questions or comments by members of the commission? Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
you're welcome. Questions or comments by the members of the public?
Statement?
You can be second.
Tom Mueller, 17 Old County Way, Portland. Hearing the question that was asked, and just want to put clarity to what's being proposed is currently the site, which has been in action for many years, or it's been open many years, it has not been active really for many of the 30 years that I've lived here in Portland. It's been off and on, and recently it's been active again, which is permitted. The regulation now stands that for 3 weeks during the year, on-site material can be, rocks can be crushed, sifted, cleaned, and sorted with the intent that it can be used when it's time to re-own that part that's been excavated so that it could be landscaped and put back into place so that it might be developed and used, and developed for perhaps a subdivision or whatever. But the intent is that the land, that if there's materials needed to do that kind of repair, it's not needed to be purchased by the owner, but they can procure it from the processing of the material on their land. If you were to go to Butler Construction and you see what they, and hear what they sound like when they're crushing rock, sorting, sifting, and washing, that's what's being proposed, not to go from 3 weeks a year, but 52 weeks a year. So every day of the year that they wanted to do that, they are asking that that be permitted. We're very concerned, I'm very concerned about the impact that would have on the harmony, the peacefulness of what goes on in this residential zone. I think it would significantly change that. And that's what my concern is, one of my concerns. In May, when this first came up, there was a study done by Geosonics that showed the decibel levels on our property line, because we had spoken and issued concern about the volume of on our property of the trucks that are coming down the access road out to 17. So I'd let the record show that there have been comments and complaints about the noise from this operation. And the Geosonics was contracted to do a decibel monitoring study while there was crushing and heavy trucks moving. And there were 2 incidents during that time that exceeded the 55 decibel level. What is 55 decibels? Okay. Well, to put it in perspective, some research would show that in a rural residential area, the decibel level is considered to be about 30. Okay. In a suburban area, it'd be about 40. What's legal is on a property line is to hit 55 decibels, and several times the data peaked beyond it. And if you were to see the chart, for a majority of the time, it was operating between 40 and 55. So it's normally in our zone and probably Paley Farms between 30 and 40 decibels. When this is going on, it was operating between the 40 and 55 range. That was taken on my property, which is about, and this is just rough because I didn't take a survey on it, about 1,250 feet from this active site. I know there's properties along the Paley Farms areas that's closer than that, maybe 850, 900 feet. And when it comes to sound, it's not proportional and linear by distance, but it's inverse squared. So to be about half as much closer could be significantly more in volume. So I don't know what that would sound like on their properties when this rock crushing, sifting, and sorting is going on. So I'd just like to make it clear that if they want to go from 3 weeks to 52 weeks, of this activity.
Is there a number longer than 3 weeks but shorter than 52 that's acceptable to you?
Well, I don't think I'm in a position to answer that question. You know what I mean? I think when we bought our property and we understand what it is and we've lived with it for this long and understanding that that's part of the balance and community of the environment, this is what it is and what it has to be, that's what's going on. And I can't speak for others.
This is, well, no, you can
Yeah.
speak, I'm asking you to speak for yourself.
Well, it's extremely noisy when that's going on, and if it's going on from 7 to 5, it's being proposed for as often, as frequently as they want to do it,
But it's not 52 weeks a year, though, is it?
unrestricted. They can do it as much as they want. To
no,
tell me
I'm-
that they can or
I'm-
can't
I'm
because
not
of weather, I
asking-
can't predict that.
I'm not asking you about how often it could be done. I know it's 50, but how often is it done? It appears to me as if this operation is closed.
It's been closed for a lot of the last 30 years, so to ask that they can do this now for every day of the workday and quickly process 500,000
Yeah.
cubic yards, which would be 35,000 triaxle trucks, if we want to do that in a year, that's going to be pretty busy.
I guess I'm asking it the wrong way.
Okay, sorry.
Does this operation take place during the winter?
It hasn't taken place through years at times.
Yes, I know.
I don't run it. I would have to defer to the business. If they're incentivized to run this through and supply, and I have no idea what you can do with gravel.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
You're third. He's second.
No, I'm just gonna make an observation. I own a budding property.
You wanna go up to the microphone?
No, not necessarily. but
Well,
if
I'd
you'd like me
agree.
to, I can. It's
Yes,
fine.
I would
Fair
appreciate it,
enough.
so we can record it, and we can record your name and so forth.
My name is Frank Keogh. I own a budding property at 241 Paley Farms Road. And I was going to make the observation that, based on what we talked about here, the definition of the site, I think, is dramatically different than what it was 30 or 40 years ago when the Varney property has been acquired for the excavation of sand and gravel. This operation has just been occurring over the past couple of years. So talk about observation, or talk about activities that occurred abutting Glassbury Turnpike, I think are significantly different than the activities that are occurring now beyond Paley Farms and the other neighborhoods. I mean, these activities have only been going on for the past year or two. And I will say that, from a noise level, you're talking about observations taking place in wintertime as early as this morning, I think 7:30. I mean, there were backup alarms going on throughout the summer and other winter months. There is, the slamming of tailgates from dump trucks and whatnot. There's been a significant change, visually. I'm looking at the landscape, and then from the sound perspective of operations going on up there for the past 2 or 3 years, which is significantly different than it was, 10 years ago, whether they own a property or not. So I think the unrestricted use to continue to go up there and now process gravel changes the dynamic of the entire neighborhood. For the most part, when you're essentially abutted by residences on the north, east, and south, operations that hadn't taken place there in the past.
Is your objection based on sound or on sight? Or is
Well, a
it-
combination of both. I think
both.
what we're talking about here is the processing aspect that they're proposing, which will increase the noise pollution beyond what it already is, which is substantially different than it was, say, 5 years ago or so.
Okay.
And how's the site different?
Well, I mean, prior was a farm field, and they had gourds and pumpkins and whatnot growing up there, and it was generally a serene type environment. Now it's a construction zone, so on my property, I know when I look to the west, I mean, that whole area has been cleared, they've constructed a road, and I understand that it's private property and they can do what they want up there, but, I mean, I think it's dramatically changed the visual appearance of the area, and then now, I mean, it's essentially a construction site, so I think moving forward with more aggressive type activities up there is generally disturbing to the neighborhood.
Okay.
Do you, they have had the 3 weeks of activity of the crushing, and when that occurs, is that a noticeable change for you?
I mean, it's absolutely a noticeable change now versus, say, fiber. I mean, we've lived there for 10 or 13 years. So, I mean, it's substantially been an increasing noticeable change.
Right, but my understanding is that there are two separate things going on. The operation has been largely kind of quiet for the past several years. In other words, there hasn't been a lot of excavation going on for big periods of time. I mean, they're well within their rights to excavate that property.
Sure.
But they just hadn't been doing it for whatever reason. And that part of their business has picked up. This
Right.
is my understanding. If it's not right, just correct me. But that part of their business has picked up, and that's something that, again, they can do because they're well within their rights to do that with
Right.
an ongoing, approval.
Right.
But the piece that we're talking about is the 3-week piece where they crush and make a lot of noise. And my question is, when that happens, do you notice that?
Well, it hasn't happened yet, so it's hard for me to say exactly, but I know what I noticed now, which is certainly an increase in the noise in that area, so adding to that would seem to be a further disturbance to what's already going on.
Because my understanding was that it had happened for a couple, it had happened for a couple of 3-week periods. So that was.
That may be the case, and I don't work from home, so I'm not at home during the day, so what daily operations are, I can't speak to exactly, but, I mean, my wife does work from home, and when I am at home, I mean, it's noticeable on a daily basis. What was kind of more the summer months, but now it seems like as of, like I said, as of this morning, there's been an increase, so.
Right, but I guess what I'm trying to just get straight in my mind is that the noise that you're hearing now is just from regular excavating. It's not from it's not for whatever we're talking about right now.
Processing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think the question is, when the crushing and screening and washing is going on, is the noise noticeably different than when they're doing normal excavation?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you add any additional activity, what's already going on up there from a processing standpoint, it's going to increase the decibel level and the noise, generally speaking.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
You're next. No, she's next, you can be after that.
Could you defer to me?
Sure.
Okay, well, if she wishes to defer, that's fine.
Thank you for making the effort of going.
Martin Christie, 106 Chestnut Hill Road. I'm there an awful lot in the daytime, probably more so than a lot of the other residents who work. I go to my daughter's home at 72 Cedar Terrace, which is down, a little further down. And I would say she's there over 10 years, and I have never heard anything until the last couple of years. And it's machinery, heavy bulldozer, like revving its engine going back and forth. I do hear the backup beep, which is only a slight contributing factor to the noise. The main noise is metal banging on rocks and trucks, and the engines revving back and forth as they take off from, I guess the dump trucks take off from a standing still, and the bulldozer going into whatever it's going into. I drove back there one time. It's just a narrow road, a long, narrow, goes back deep, and there's a bridge, goes over a nice stream. It's a well-built concrete and steel bridge. And I wondered what the pollution that goes down into the Connecticut River. It's not Hale Brook. It must be another brook that goes off of Hale Brook down into the canal, and what goes into that brook. But there's an awful lot of noise. It's not in the winter. It's not in the late fall or the early spring. It's mainly in late spring, early fall, and the summer. And it is obnoxious noise. It's not all day long. It's on and off. And it's not that it's a steady noise. It's a bumping and banging and all kinds of things. So I'm asking this commission to deny their application due to the closeness of all the residents on Whole County Road, Paley Farm Road, Cedar Terrace, and Hartfield Road. It's a lot of noise. It's not pleasant. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Nancy Woolhouse Mueller, 17 Old County Way. Since I love maps and passing on a map, I don't have enough for everyone, but maybe you can share. This is a natural soils group from 2006 Plan of Development. And what I'd like you to take a look at is the excessively drained soils. Let me just- As you can see, the excessively drained soils basically go from actually the area that we're talking about now with the excavation, all the way down through the four corners where there's other excavations, as you well know, down through Job's Pond, and then down through the Connecticut River. This area is excessively drained. It's the old Connecticut riverbed. Much of that area is also a residential zone. So what this proposal is doing is it's opening up a lot of that area to not only, of course, excavation, but this crushing, screening, whatever. So I think you have to take a look at that. Now, you might say that the proposed regulation says, well, the site must have direct access to a state highway or arterial street. Well, you're thinking, okay, then the trucks are going to come out of the site and go right on to the street. Well, if you look, and nothing is mentioned, by the way, in this proposal about what the length of the access, the length of access has to be. So this is from a map from Geosonics that was submitted of the application last year. And this shows you that the access way is over 2,000 feet. So we get rumbling trucks going through the former Ansaldi pit for 2,000 feet in back of our homes on Old County Way. So if you're thinking that being on an arterial is going to give some of the residential zones or some of the residences, I'm sorry, kind of a buffering, it's not going to, because in other zones you could find another way to get into an interior lot. I just want to clear up a couple of things. The Ansaldi pit was the one that was running for a long time. The Ansaldi pit was actually closed. It was after I left. It was, I think Deanna was here, and it was actually closed. The Ansaldi pit is used as that 2,000-foot access way. The Varney field is the new area, and 562,000 cubic yards are due to come out of there in Phase 1 and Phase 2. Attorney Alter talked about, let's get this done rapidly because this is what would happen. That's Phase 1 and Phase 2. It's not going to happen rapidly no matter how you look at it. It's just way too much cubic yardage coming out of there. We definitely have been before this board complaining about noise. The Geosonics also, and I only have 4, I apologize, you have to share. It shows you that the screener is over, even though they said unknown reason for a spike, only screener running. Well, I think there's a good reason that it's way over what it's supposed to be. And the truck traffic at my house, at our house, is over 55 decibels. Attorney Alters suggested that if this regulation is approved, that they would have to meet the special permit parameters, which they would. But I would like you to think about how many earth excavations have come before this commission over the last umpteen years, and how many have ever been denied once they're ongoing? I bet it's 0. Attorney Alter also suggested that you have some letters there talking about economic development and how, create businesses, and some of the other business owners are in favor of this. Did a little bit of research here on economics. There are 2 lots. One is the Varney Field, which is now being excavated, and then there's what I'm calling the old Ansaldi lot, which is the access way to and from the site that's being excavated. For 113 acres, the total taxes for real estate, as there's no personal property that is that's declared, is $8,105.49. That's for 113 acres. And I don't begrudge anybody going into forest land to decreasing their taxes, but in terms of economic development, okay, so in terms of what Tom and I pay, we're on 1.75 acres. We have 2 cars, and we pay $8,674.32, which is $568.83 more than Portland S&G pay. So if you're looking at it from economic development standpoint, in terms of increase of tax base, I'm paying more, or we're paying more than Scott is, or the owner is. Let's see. One thing that this regulation is, and I mentioned before, does not talk about is that there is no mention of how close the trucks can be to a residence or property line. It's as if, the trucks kind of appear there, and we don't really talk about access except that it has to come out to an arterial, and the roadway, the access way, has to have some kind of dust control on it. There's no talk about storage of screened crushed material. Where would that be? How is that handled? And who is the ultimate consumer? And we've got Butler Construction, which is in an industrial zone. People come in and out of there. Anybody can go in and out of there. We've gone in and out of there buying things. I'd like to know what actually is going to be happening with the material that's going to be processed. Getting more specific, I don't really understand what number 3 means on their proposal. It says, no screening, sifting, washing, or crushing of equipment shall be located closer than 150 feet to a property line or residentially zoned property, and no screening, sifting, washing, or crushing equipment shall be located closer than 450 feet from any residential structure existing as of that date of the initial unrestricted special permit. I'm not exactly sure what that means. Do the screeners or whatever equipment get to remain there in that one location even if there are new residences are closer than the 450 feet? So is it that here's the screener and then and I'm not just talking about, I'm talking about anywhere in town. Here's where the screener is, and then this is where the location was initially. Then say there's a development around it, that screener gets to stay there. I'm not sure what that really means, but if that's
Nancy, that's changed a little bit. I think because it says it's not only located, it's also or used, and that it says that twice, and the...
which one are you looking at, Bruce?
I'm looking at the one that the attorney changed. That's why I asked about our attorney's version of this was that acceptable. So it reads, no screening, sifting, washing, and crushing equipment shall be located or used closer than 150 feet.
Right.
And it
Okay.
also says located or used closer to 450 feet. And the description is as unrestricted is lined out.
Right, but I guess, and at some point, maybe Attorney Alter can talk about this, but I got the feeling from reading both of those that you have a screener, and then if other residences are built around it, then that screener kind of can stay there because it was part of the initial application, which means that the zone, the development within that zone is kind of rotating or revolving around a screener, which doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't think the commission feels that in a residential zone that's the I don't know what I'm trying to say. The force should be the what am I trying to say here? Yeah, instead of having residences being able to build where they want and without encroachment of the crusher, I feel that it's going the other way around. I feel like the crusher is kind of going to dictate what that zone is like and what that people's quality of life is going to be like. Doesn't make sense to me. It should not. The resident should be primary in, I think, a residential zone. So you can ask them about that. I could be reading it incorrectly. Let's see. Okay, so Attorney Alter also talked about that this commission does have a great deal of discretion with their legislative role with a text amendment. And what the statutes say is that it has to be, the text amendment has to be in accordance with the comprehensive plan, which is basically your zoning regs, as you know, and with due consideration of the local plan of conservation and development. Your plan of conservation and development, M1.1, the policy is protect the character and integrity of a residential zone. The action item is implement actions to protect existing neighborhoods. I would like to submit to you that allowing crushing, screening, etc. in a residential zone is not doing that. The plan of development also says use the plan of development, conservation development, as a basis for land use decisions by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Article 10 says that your review criteria specifically talks about looking at the goals, objectives, and recommendations of the plan of conservation and development, the general character and zoning of the neighborhood, impacts on the surrounding area, traffic congestion impacts, the impacts on surrounding property values, and the health and general welfare of the community. I would submit that when we go to sell our house and we have to disclose fully that we not only have a gravel pit, but we have screening, crushing, and whatever else going on 52 weeks a year, I think that's going to have a definite effect on potential buyers. It would with me. Lastly, your special permit regulations, which is part of the earth excavation, it says that the proposal shall be of such location, size, and character that will be in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development of the zone, the neighborhood, and the town, will not be detrimental to established properties in the area or conflict with traffic characteristics of the neighborhood. The location and size of such proposal and the nature and intensity of operations involved in or conducted in connection with such proposal, its site layout, and its relation to access streets shall be such that both pedestrians and vehicular traffic to, from, and in the vicinity of the use will not be hazardous, inconvenient, or detrimental to the character of the zone or conflict with the traffic characteristics of the neighborhood. I just submit to you that with the increase in intensity that this crusher is going to bring up, and the increase in trucks, that those will not be met. Those standards won't be met. I think there are other people here to talk about the
noise factor in our neighborhood.
Is there anybody else, a member of the public, who'd like to speak? Yep, go ahead. And you're next.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Zaluski. I live at 5 Old County Way, and we've lived there through the excavation the last couple of years. We've been there for over 15, 20, I don't know how many years. But the noise is unruly in the summer. You're out there trying to enjoy your kids, and it's unruly, so I just can't imagine it multiplied more with what they want to have done on the property. We knew what we were buying into when we bought the home, but it was the use it was at now. And also, just a question for the attorney. You submitted a letter from Al Gondek that he was in favor of this. Do you represent him?
No, you speak through the chair.
Okay, so
You
I
don't-
just
you
want to
don't have
ask if he's...
Conversations with their attorney.
So yeah, I believe he's being represented on another matter, so thank you. If you could look into this, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, okay.
Oh, it's a trip.
Hi, how's everyone doing? I'm Mark Weiser. I live at 3 Old County Way with my wife Nina, and she couldn't make it tonight. So we've apparently, according to what I've heard today, the Ansaldi pit was in operation for 40 years. I've lived at my house for 36 years, so I was there for most of those years. It was my understanding, and I early on when we moved in, we did have a meeting with Mr. Ansaldi or one of his representatives. He would only haul sand to his concrete place in Manchester when it was raining. He would use 2 dump trucks. So the level of operation that was continuously in operation for the 35 years that I've been there, and then I had a deck built and I got a permit and everything from the town, and I sit on my deck and I can look out and see the beautiful trees, and the sand pit was kind of below there, and I would, on rainy days, I wouldn't be sitting on my deck, but that's when the Ansaldi trucks came in and out, and there were only 2 of them. Okay, so the operation that we're talking about now is orders of magnitude larger than what the Ansaldi company was using that operation for. And again, they hauled their sand to Manchester to make concrete. So again, you did a good job zoning this place residential. It should stay. The zoning law is perfect the way it is. It shouldn't be changed. There's no reason to change it, specifically since the increase in the residential area with Paley Farms, our property values. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public who wish to speak? Yep. I can't see, okay, I can't see you. But
Martha Dumas, 910 Glastonbury Turnpike. That parcel of land has been in my family for 60 years. I remember my parents arguing with Ansaldi over runoff from their excavation project into Hales Brook, which is included in the 910 Glastonbury Turnpike property. I have in my lifetime seen considerable fill-in the pond that Hales Brook flows into. I cannot attribute all of that certainly to Ansaldi's operation, but I believe there's some responsibility there. I also can tell you that when the rock crushing was being done in preparation for building Paley Farms, that I did not have an official study done, but that noise was extreme, and that was about 30 years ago. So just wanted to submit those points for your consideration. Thank you.
okay. Other members of the public who wish to speak? Yep.
Hi, my name's Kathy Noel. I live at 246 Paley Farm Road. I came here to be a member of the audience because I had a letter that was put in my mailbox. I am not going to be eloquent, and I'm not going to tell you that I have a lot of history or research that I've done into this. I can tell you that since January 26, 1991, I have lived at Paley Farm Road. I lived there during construction times where it was not as noisy as what I hear from these crushings when they happen. I can tell you that I work all day, every day during the week. Every year, I take 2 weeks off, the same 2 weeks every year. And the last 2 years, I can't sit on my deck. I'm walking around the neighborhood asking people, what's that noise? What's that noise? I didn't even really know what all of this was about. I'm looking at this map. I'm speaking from emotion, but I'm looking at this map and I'm like, now I know what the noise is. I'm probably one of the closest houses to this crushing over here and didn't even know it. I knew it was happening across the street. So I say here, in answer to your question, how many weeks are allowed, I'll submit to you that in the summertime, no weeks. People are out there with their kids, they're out there on vacation, we can't enjoy our property. The noise is more than when the houses were being built around me in my neighborhood. I just feel that in the wintertime, you asked how many weeks are acceptable. In the wintertime, the windows are closed. Crush away. My windows are closed. All summer, my windows are open. I can't get away from it. It's in my house. It's out my house. When I'm walking my dog, all I hear is this crushing noise all through this time period. And if you had to live there in a place where you wanted to enjoy your free time, that you're not at work, it makes it really horrible during those couple of weeks. I think another point that one of the folks here stood up and made was about the dump trucks. And 30 years ago, I work in technology. Technology in every arena in the world, in every industry, is far superior to what it was 30 years ago. And I guess I would submit that the dump trucks that happened 30 years ago, right now there's more trucks. The technology for crushing is probably improved insofar as how much and how loud can be crushed at any given point in time. I'm just really concerned that it's not a pleasant time in the summertime in our neck of the woods. And actually this map shocks me because I didn't even realize how close I was to all of this.
Other members of the public who wish to speak? Yep.
Hi, good evening. I'm Kate Martel. I live at 235 Paley Farm Road. I have a lot of neighbors here, and it's just interesting. You guys did a great job putting information into our mailboxes to educate us on this information. I will say one thing. I've lived there for 17 years, and for probably the past 15, it's kind of a repeat pattern. I didn't really know what was back there. It didn't bother me. I just had beautiful woods. You could kind of see the Connecticut River when the trees cleared. Now on my deck, we sit outside, even in the winter, or when we're looking out my kitchen window, dump trucks all along, and they're, I don't even know how far, 500, 700, 1,000 feet away, I'm not sure, but I see dump trucks. I pull in my driveway at night, and I see lights back there when it used just to be the Connecticut River and trees. So to sell my house, I think now would be difficult. Again, someone talked about disclosure of what goes on behind their property, and I can't imagine if we're going to go from 3 weeks to 52 weeks a year, the even bigger disruption that it'll cause in our neighborhood. Lots of banging, lots of booming. I think as an average citizen, you wouldn't even know what it was. You just see big trucks back there and hear a lot of noise. So to expand that in their time frame doesn't seem to make sense to me. Thank you.
Other members of the public who wish to speak? Yes.
Good evening, Simon Mielik, 225 Paley Farms Road. I've seen a couple of my neighbors here. I'm one of the lucky guys who gets to work from home a few times a week, and during the summer months, as others already mentioned, I'm unable to do so. On conference calls, I always have to close the windows and the doors just because of banging noise, the backup sound of the trucks, and the rock crushing. So I agree with everybody else here, and I ask you that you consider this, but I think our quality of life actually went down. That's my personal opinion. And when I bought the house in '09, it was really nice, peaceful, quiet. we really enjoy living there, and I hope that we can convince you to consider, because I don't think 52 weeks, to me, that's a no-brainer. It should be a definite no. So I would ask you to reconsider this, and thank you.
Other members of the public who might wish to speak? Yep.
Ed Organic from 950 Glastonbury Turnpike. I would really consider that you don't approve this. Reason being is from our house, we hear the dump trucks coming in with their Jake brakes coming on to slow down to go down the hill before the driveway. And then we hear the rock crushing on the other side of the house. So we have no barrier, no peace. And to increase that would be disastrous. And it was zoned for a reason, the way it is. And it should be kept the way it is. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Good evening, Commission and public. My name is Kevin Lawrence. I live on Cedar Terrace. Been there about 10 years. I just want to point out to the committee that I find it interesting that in the Portland Sand and Gravel's representative who spoke tonight, I think by my tally, referenced 70 years at least 5 times, and the Ansaldi property at least 5 times. And what that seems to be doing to me is highlighting the past and not the future. And that seems strange to me, and I was scratching my head as I was thinking about that, and I'm still scratching my head, right? Why would we be highlighting the past when we're looking to change a residential zone regulation permanently, or for every 2 years, I suppose, and not really focus on the future? So I bought the property about 10 years ago, really quiet. One of the selling points for me was the wildlife management area that's behind there. I think many of you know, or maybe don't know, it's the Warramug Wildlife Management area back there. Super quiet, geese honking all the time, the sound travels, it's bucolic, right? And I was fortunate enough to retire this summer after 25 years with the state. And I'm home in the summer with my kids. And even my kids are asking me, what is that noise? What is that noise? And, you know, I explain it to them, and my son's into Thomas the Train and so forth, and so he kind of digs the noise and the troublesome trucks, right? Well, that's what's going on back there, is troublesome trucks. It's loud, it's banging, it's disruptive. Someone mentioned earlier tonight that it's not constant, it's not even rhythmic, it's sort of obnoxious in its pattern, and because of that, it's very disruptive. And I think I see a lot of shaking heads up and down here. I mean, you guys are hearing that, right? So I'd like the commission to consider that. Another thing I'd like the commission to consider is we're in a residential zone, so there's rules and regulations there for a reason, and the primary reason is to keep it residential. And what is being asked is to make it a noisier residence and noisier residential area. That's not what we all signed on for when we moved into a residence like this. I would have moved more city-like if that was the kind of environment I was looking for. Some folks have mentioned the resale and so forth, and I can personally attest to how important it was to me to have the wildlife and the woods and the sounds that come along with that, or the non-sounds that come along with that. And this is going to change that significantly. The representative mentioned, the Portland Sand and Gravel representative mentioned earlier too, a term significant density. I don't really know what significant density is. I tried to look it up on Google while I was listening. I mean, it's kind of all over the map as far as significant density. I feel like my residence is significantly dense, and that's why I bought it. So, and I think a lot of people may have done that for the same reason. So I would like the commission to consider the significant density of each individual property that is within pretty close earshot. Another thing I'd like the commission to think about is just the terrain that we're talking about. I mentioned the honking geese, and some of you probably hear coyotes like crazy, right? Especially this time of year when sound travels. The river valley, sound travels incredibly far in the river valley. So one of the things that I'd like to point out is this is pretty darn close to a lot of our residences. And even if it were farther, I still think it would be quite disruptive. So please consider that as you're reviewing some of the documents and the overall terrain. And I would invite any of you to come. There's a hiking trail off of Cedar Terrace. You guys should come check it out. You're gonna need some hiking poles because to get down it, it's really steep. And then there's a nice brook and wetland area down there. And then on the opposite side, it's really steep again. And what's interesting about that is the sound just comes down that valley. And if anyone here hunts or knows folks who hunt, you are very keen to how sound travels and a stick that gets broken and how that sound will travel and where you might want to set up or not set up depending on how sound travels. I will tell you that the area that we're talking about, sound travels quite well to the residences that are represented here tonight. So I would just like the committee to kind of think about some of those things as you review the documents and make your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public who wish to speak? Yep. Well, anybody else first time? Before Nancy comes back up. No, okay, go ahead.
Just a couple of things. I know how much the commission depends on Jeff Jacobson for his comments. And I just want to reiterate, or not reiterate, but read something from his memo. This is from the memo that you have dated January 12th. In an effort to address the comments noted above, subsequent revisions were made by the applicant to the proposed amendment that is subject of the current formal application. It is important to note that the sole intent of our review was to provide additional clarification so that any such amendment could be clearly interpreted and applied by town staff. As such, this review should not be considered as either an endorsement of or opposition to this proposed amendment. So, oftentimes when you get Jeff Jacobson's memos, it's kind of a go-ahead sort of thing. He's saying very specifically that that's not the case here. The other thing I just want to say is I really hope that the commission doesn't subject our neighborhood as well as the other neighborhoods in the town of Portland to this. I strongly feel, and I know I live there, but I also know that if you look at where that other sand and gravel is, and I just really feel that you're just opening up the residents here in the town to a lot of grief, a lot of heartache, and the clanging and banging honestly is insane. And I know you've heard this from Tom and me, but tonight you are now hearing from a lot of other people who live in the area. So, thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to? Yes.
Hi, my name is Dave Spinelli. We live at 226 Paley Farms Road, like right across the street from Simon and some of my other neighbors here. And we bought our house like 2 years ago. I came, so I had to say it. I'm not like prepared or anything, but it's loud out there. Like I water my yard in the summer. I'm out there like hand watering it, spending a lot of time out there. We have a pool, and like when like Kelly comes over, like my friends, it's like literally like I didn't even know what it was, but it's like, what is there, like bombs going off? Like seriously, like it is like loud out there. So I just wanted to, got the thing in my mailbox and I just wanted to say it, but it really is like loud out there. So.
Other members of the public who wish to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Margaret Coe, and it's 2 Redberry Lane in Portland. I don't happen to be anywhere near this particular site, but as I look at the current section, you're your zoning currently states in all residential zones, screening, et cetera, should be used for, may be permitted by special permit. If you accept this text amendment, this will apply to all residential areas, correct? We're not talking about one, we're talking for valid reason about one site, but this is text amendment to all residential areas.
Yeah, we think there are 34.
Yeah, thank you. So I would like to consider that as the proposal is not limited. It's rather wide-ranging. Thank you.
Okay. Other members of the public who wish to speak? Hearing none. Is there any reason not to close the public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, can I be heard?
Sure.
For a few moments?
You may.
We did submit last May the full geosonics report. I don't know what, if anything, was submitted by either Mr. or Mrs. Mueller. This is that one sheet? Okay.
Yeah, this is the report.
So rather than just have a part of that report, I'll submit another copy of the full report. If anybody wants to take the time to read it again, what you're going to find is that for the most part, there is no violation or exceedance of the Portland ordinance or the Connecticut DEP noise regulation ordinance, except at one point a loaded triaxle truck leaving the site peaked out at just over 55. There's one unknown spike, likely a technician movement, it says, but I think it's appropriate that the entire report be available to the commission if it chooses to look at it. Sometimes when I do this kind of work, I feel like I've not done a good job of explaining what it is we propose to do. So I'm going to take a minute and just rehash what it was that we discovered when we made this proposition to you in May of 2017. It is that there are techniques that can be employed that reduce the sound impact to surrounding areas. And we presented you with a plan that Geosonics had developed, which would in fact accomplish that according to those experts. It's a significant economic investment for an excavation company to undertake what they suggested, and it was on that basis that we made that proposal that was denied, and it would be on that basis that we would come forward with a proposal, and I know no one in this room is going to believe it because I'm a lawyer and I'm speaking for the applicant, but in point of fact, the plan that we have is far better, according to our noise experts, than the operation that we currently have, and that it would effectively reduce a lot of the issues that are being discussed. I can't speak to the concern about truck noise coming to or leaving the site. That's not going to change no matter how this regulation is developed. But the other concerns that a lot of the neighbors expressed, according to our sound experts, and we paid them quite a substantial amount of money to educate us in this regard, that we could have a significant impact on the kinds of noise that a lot of people at Paley Farms are are complaining about. And finally, the opportunity to make an attempt to find a better way to excavate and process material was an undertaking that my clients financed and have pursued through over a year of effort, not because they're gluttons for punishment, but because they do try to do things in the most economic and the most unobtrusive manner possible. Scott Dufford and Scott Palugi take a lot of pride in what they do, and the step that they proposed was in pursuit of that. Nancy Mueller and I have a different definition of economic gain, and I learned this a long time ago in representing clients like this with this activity. Our entire economy needs earth materials to function, and they have to come from somewhere. And when you have significant deposits of valuable earth materials, it is an economic driver for great segments of our economy. This material that happens to be on this property is significant in that regard. And to be able to produce it and provide it for construction projects is an economic driver. It's not a tax-paying economic driver. It's a much more far-reaching activity. And I understand that everybody wants it to be from somewhere else. But we need earth materials for roads, for concrete, for bituminous, for everything that goes into the development of our communities. And the proposition that we're presenting to you is an opportunity to do that in a way that is actually less obtrusive, less intrusive to the people around us. But we need the opportunity to be able to make that economically successful, which is why we are proposing the regulation change that we have. I thank you for your consideration. I would state again for the record, just so there's no misunderstanding, that the changes that Attorney Olsen suggested to the proposed draft are acceptable to the applicant if the commission sees fit to employ that. And we would agree to one additional condition, since I think Mrs. Mueller raised it. We have no objection to a condition that says there can be no retail sales from this site. I guess you can go to Butler and buy a bucket of sand. This site would not ever entertain that kind of activity. So we have no objection to that as a condition. If you see fit to adopt the regulation that we propose. I thank you for your time and your attention.
Any other comments? Yep.
Attorney Alter said that Geosonics has said that there are certain recommendations for buffeting the sound, and there are some in there. The only ones I really remember were the backing up noises, not the clanging and the banging and all that kind of thing. But I want to say that this is a town-wide regulation that would affect people town-wide. Not everybody, you can't depend on everybody to do geosonics and follow their recommendations. Not that I'm saying that they're the end-all and be-all, because I don't believe that they are. But you have to remember, this is town-wide. And in terms of economic gain, I'm not saying that we don't need sand and gravel. God knows we do. I mean, everything that's being built, we need that. However, there are alternatives. He doesn't have to do it on that property. It's a residential zone. It's obtrusive. intrusive, and he does not have to, there are all alternatives for it. And in terms of, again, economic gain, I believe the plan of development specifically talks about expanding the tax base, that kind of thing. That's why I brought up that whole tax, what we pay in taxes and what they pay in taxes.
Anyone else? Like, yes?
Frank Picorni, 46 Rockwood Drive. The property, the Barney property, is not where the Ansaldi property is, which is in a ravine. It's up on a hillside. During the summer months, with leaves on the trees, and even having their crushing equipment in a pit, which is one of the attributes that they use to mitigate the sound, I can still not sit on my deck for those 3 weeks. The reason I haven't complained is I sit there and say, thank God this is only for 3 weeks. I can't imagine this going on for 52 weeks a year. So unless they put a dome over this thing, I don't know how they can keep the noise to a reasonable level. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public like to speak?
Briefly, Mr. Chairman, I promise.
And you can be next.
Well, if everybody wants to finish, then I'll make a final comment and stop. Otherwise, I'm going to end up getting up again, so.
Oh, okay, well then, let him,
He
he doesn't get to
determine
speak
that.
last.
So we're gonna keep talking, you're not gonna go last.
Well, actually, there is gonna be some limit to this talk.
Mr. Chairman,
You know, we can't go, if you begin to repeat yourself, then I'm gonna shut you off.
It is the custom that the applicant gets the last word.
Well,
So.
maybe in Glastonbury, but I don't
Again, Martin Christie, 106 Chestnut Hill Road. I'd like to point out that the attorney for S&G, I believe it is, stated that the natural resource is there, and it should be used because it's needed, maybe in this part of Connecticut, but it can be found in other places. And we had zoning rules and regulations, and this was zoned residential property, and barred S&G from doing their operation, what they're doing now. And we shouldn't just change our zoning laws back and forth to suit whatever comes along and who makes the best argument. Now, I'd like to also point out that one of the ladies said there was a pond back there that seems to be silting up. There's a lot of old-timers in town here that tell me that Hale Brook is stocked by the state with trout, but there are no trout past the pond. Well, that must be her pond, and it must be the reason it's silted up. After that pond, further down Hale Brook, there's a swamp, an old pond that must have filled up and long, long ago, nothing to do with S&G, and there must be loads and loads of snapping turtles and painted back turtles. Now, if they're going to have a washing operation, all of this is going to wash down towards the Connecticut River, and I'm sure that swamp will either expand or get silted up. And you can go to Cedar Terrace any spring, and anybody here that lives at Paley Farm will tell you, you'll see dozens of snapping turtles and painted, those yellow spotted turtle, both endangered species coming up out of Hale Brook, maybe 400 or 500 feet up and going across the road to other people's lawn to bury their eggs in the mulch. So you not only have the impact of the whatever will go into the Connecticut River, but also the wildlife there. You can also go down to Hale Brook a lot of times, and if you sit there quietly, you'll see deer come down off of the hill where they're, on the other side of where they're digging, come down for a drink. So you'd ruin that natural resource, and we've already decided, you people have already decided, thank God, that this is residentially zoned, and it should stay that way. The vast majority of people want it that way. Nobody has come here other than the owner or the lawyer for the owner to speak in favor of digging the sand. I know we need it, it's a natural resource, but it could be gotten somewhere else. Thank you.
I hope everyone understands that no one is proposing that we change the zone, but what is permitted in that zone. Everybody understand that? Okay, any last comments? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Donna Cody, 13 Old County Way. I'm not going to speak to the noise issue. I think that's been covered. And you did answer my question earlier that there are other locations that in Portland that could be impacted by this text amendment. And since the text amendment change could open other locations to these activities, yet there is no minimal tax revenue to Portland for making this change. In fact, there may be a decline in revenue if residential property values around these locations take a decrease. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Anyone else who hasn't spoken who would like to do so? Okay. Any reason to not close this public hearing?
As long as the commission feels that you have had adequate input,
Yeah, I think, yes, we
in order
have.
to make a decision, then there's no
Okay.
reason to close the,
All right.
not close the.
All right. Everyone speaking? Can I have a motion to close the public hearing on application 1709? So,
moved.
second? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? All right, the public hearing on this motion, this application is closed. Okay. Do we wish to vote on this now, or do we wish to consider it?
Well, are there any questions? I don't know.
Well, personally, I see this as a relatively difficult thing. It's apparently based on changes in operation over the last couple of years, and we're asked to trade off the business's ability to run his business versus this noise and disruption in residential properties abutting it.
But it's just a part of the business, the crushing and screening part.
Yeah, well,
They
the
can remove.
The claim is that they can do that 52 weeks a year. And a solution, for example, is to limit the calendar time more than 3 weeks, but obviously not 52. And I don't know what that number might be.
Well, we have to address the text change, not just the particular instance, and a text change would open that up to anywhere throughout the town, and there might be circumstances that are even more so and would get twice the number of people here in opposition, and we would open that up
Yes.
on a text change. It's one thing to extend another special permit.
Well, what happened, yes.
But a text change would just open that up for anywhere in town for that to happen.
Yes, but it would, if it's by special permit, then it wouldn't be automatic. It would be based on,
Right.
People applying. So,
So we're bringing the instance of one location in as kind of the deciding factor for a text change, which.
well,
we're not really supposed to
that's
do.
usually how it happens. It's usually driven by a single location, but knowing it's town-wide. And we have to keep track of the implications of that. As I said, it's a difficult decision for me, because I believe the business has a right to operate his business. I also believe that the neighborhood needs to be, relatively speaking, quiet. So, I'm not sure what to do about this.
Well, could we, could the applicant have and I don't know that this is appropriate, but could they meet with the neighborhood and have a discussion with and explain to them what they are proposing to do about the noise? And see if that meets with the neighborhood's approval? I mean, I don't know if there's examples.
Well,
I
the
don't
only
know.
thing they've proposed to do is increase
That's a
number of days they have.
No, they talked about upgrading their equipment
Yeah.
to decrease the noise.
Well-
I don't know by how much. I don't
They've also
have.
had the opportunity to do
Yeah, that.
Yeah, well, I don't know if they've done that, and I'm just saying, maybe, and then maybe people, if it meets their agreement or whatever, then there wouldn't be such a dilemma about, putting like a
That's-
shorter period of time or something.
That's a good idea, but we can't require that.
Right.
We
No, I'm not-
we can't
They
ask
can
them
apply
to
again,
meet with each
and
other
they can
or
go
not.
back and do that.
All right, well, that's why I
And
asked
apply
it.
again.
That's why I asked it. Doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah.
So I guess I have two comments.
Go ahead.
A lot of the public comments seem to be related to the noise of just general excavation and a concern about, the increase in noise with screening, crushing, washing. But I think a lot of the comments were just relative to the noise, the change in the view, just due to general excavation.
Right.
And that's not what we're here to talk about.
Right.
I guess my second comment is the crushing, screening, washing does not have to be done on site. It could be done somewhere else.
Well, that's where
No,
it
it
is.
can now.
That's where it is, that's what happens now, and
Right.
that's what they want to change.
They want to do it on site at any time.
Well,
I advised my son yesterday, I said, you get the haircut now before you go for the job. Don't go for the job and tell them you're gonna get it cut. They have the opportunity to make the changes and go, look what we've done, let us do it longer. And so far, they've not done that.
another option is to table this until our next meeting and see if there are any changes. That's the only other thing I can suggest.
I'm ready.
Although I do think we ought to make a couple of changes. That is to say, one of the attorneys, our attorney suggested that truck traffic be restricted to the hours of operation, and I agree with that, and also that no retail sales take place on site. Those are a couple of changes that we could easily make. So,
Right. It sounds like truck traffic is just one of many concerns.
yes,
though,
it is.
right? About
But
noise.
the issue is around timing.
I don't think we need to table it, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't know anybody.
all right. Well, do you wish to vote on it? Yes?
Personally, yes.
Yes.
Okay, want to vote? Do you have a motion? For your information, these motions are always stated in the positive, so don't get excited. Just what it's read.
Motion to approve application 17-09, request for text amendment to zoning regulations, section 9.5.3.c.4, earth material removal, filling and excavation application procedures and requirements, general requirements to permit the screening, sifting, washing, or crushing of material native to the site to be used for site purposes and off-site purposes with restrictions in residential zones as modified by the town attorney, application of Portland S&G LLC. With the following modifications, that's.
If you want to add any.
You want to add,
Truck traffic is restricted to the hours of operation and no retail
No
sales.
retail sales on the site. And do I have to read the effective date too?
Yeah, you read the whole thing.
This zoning regulation text amendment change would go into effect on,
You have to pick one.
You pick a date.
okay.
Well, it should be after the appeal period.
After the appeal period. March 1st?
Sure.
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay,
2018.
right,
Or 2000.
2018. Okay.
Is there a second?
Oh, I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay. Motion fails. Okay, next order of business is the extension request of application 8-25 Portland Town Place, mixed-use development located on Route 66, application of Portland Town Center. When is this? Folks, we'd be happy to have you talk with each other, but please do it outside the room.
Which one is this?
This is number 7.
This is just the letter.
Yes.
This is just this.
Right, that's just a letter.
I hid my agenda.
Okay.
Poor Fred had to sit there.
So that's done. Do we have to do anything extra?
We have to approve, the extension, but that's it.
She's a good speaker.
Can I have a motion to approve this as an extension request of application 8-25? Yes, motion?
So moved.
Second?
Bruce, we have a
All those in
motion.
favor, aye? Opposed, nay? Okay, that request is approved. Application 17-12, Isinglass Hill Road, request for re-subdivision modification.
Wait, we don't know who, yeah.
Was that you?
Motion?
I made it and
Seconded.
Seconded it.
Oh, you didn't put your names in on there. Oh, I did. Oh. Application 70-12,
And we didn't.
On
No,
the
on
motion.
this one, just, we
Yeah.
didn't get a motion.
request for a waiver not to require planting for a tree buffer along front setback of rear lots parallel to back line of front lots. Application of Michael Boise, I guess. Property of Elm Leaf Incorporated, Assessors Map 129, lots 9, 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, and Zone R25. You're here to speak for the motion on the application. Go ahead.
My name is Chris Bell. I'm a professional engineer from Higganum, representing the applicant who could not be here tonight. We are requesting that, well, this is the entire subdivision of Isinglass Hill Road. These are the two front lots. There is by requirement, there's a required tree buffer to be planted between the back of the front lots and the beginning of the rear lots. You show them this is the tree buffer. We were thinking about doing this during the subdivision process, but it was really hard to tell out there where this was really going to be because it was all very heavily wooded. Now that this driveway, the shared driveway is in that goes to the rear lots, the proposed houses are way back here of the two rear lots, and these are the two front lot houses here. We can clearly see that this is a very heavy tree line here that exists. In order to put these evergreen trees in, we would have to cut down a lot of trees so that they would survive because it's a pretty heavy wooded canopy there of oak trees. And we'd have to cut down a lot of trees to put trees in. It doesn't make sense. You know, if we planted them without cutting the trees, they would not survive. There would be pretty heavy canopy. So we're asking that because of the heavy tree buffer that's already there, which you can clearly see now because the lot lines are very distinct, we're asking the waiver that we not plant those.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Yes.
Oh, my gosh. Long one.
Okay. Motion to approve application 1712 Isinglass Hill Road, request for a re-subdivision modification, request for a waiver to not require planting of tree buffer along front setback of rear lots parallel to back line of front lots. Application of Michael Gios, property, Boise, property of Elm Leaf Inc., assessors map 129, lots 9, 9-2, 9-3, and 9-4, zone R25. This re-subdivision modification will modify an existing 4-lot re-subdivision approved by P&Z on February 6, 2014, and allow them to eliminate the landscape buffer between the front and rear lots as shown on record subdivision map prepared by Robert R. Weaver, LS, dated 10/24/13, and revised 10/1/14 to site development plan prepared by Christopher G. Bell, P.E., dated 10/21/13, and revised 10/09/14, and based on testimony and subject to the following instructions and modifications that are integral to this approval. 1, that this approval will expire in 5 years as per zoning regulations, section 10.4.d. 2, that the applicant revise the plan to remove the tree buffer that is part of this approval. 3, that the certified letter of approval be placed on the revised final plan. 4, that 3 paper copies and a Mylar be prepared that includes the certified letter of approval, the required signature block, a title block, and a map reference that will direct an interested party to the previously approved subdivision map and site plan that is filed with the town clerk's office and be submitted to the planning department for endorsement by the P&Z chairman. 5, that after endorsement, the Mylars be filed on the land records within 180 days per zoning regulations, section 10.5.3.2.a. Reason this proposal conforms with section 3.10.h.2 of the zoning regulations.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, the motion passes and the application is approved. That was really easy. I wish they were all that easy.
That was
Yeah.
easy.
You need this? Oh, sure.
Okay, next order. I understand why we do this. The public hearing for February 15th for application 17-10. Fine. Let's do it.
Second.
Receive application 17-13.
What happened to my agenda?
I don't understand if this is going to be on the agenda for the next meeting? 17-13?
It would have to be February 15th because of time for legal notice.
That's fine. Staff report. Staff report.
There is none.
There is none. That's easy.
Public the public has run away.
Okay. Apparently there's no public comment.
Having too much fun, Terry.
Next order of business is the approval of minutes for December 21st. You have a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? All right, the minutes are approved. Next order of business is a motion to adjourn.
Well, can we just talk about,
So
can we
moved.
talk about our stuff, our other, thing amongst ourselves?
The Brainerd.
What other thing?
The Brainerd.
The Brainerd place.
You can't,
In the meeting you can, not outside of the
no,
meeting.
right,
Well, we're still in the meeting.
no.
Oh.
No. You have to have
We've-
everybody here.
Okay.
So, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, once again.